Imagine this. It's midnight. The world is silent, but not empty. Somewhere beyond what the eye can see, something moves in the shadows. It hesitates, not because it's weak, but because it knows who it's about to face. That's you, Scorpio. For years, I've studied every sign under the American sky, but only one sign has a reputation that sends chills through both the living and the unseen. And that's not a rumor. Even the darkest forces, the ones that thrive in fear, chaos, and control, tread carefully when they sense your presence. Why? Because you carry a fire. They can't extinguish a mind, they can't manipulate, and a spirit they can't break. Your very existence is a disruption to everything they depend on. I've seen it in boardrooms, in back alleys, in whispered stories passed through generations. And tonight, we're going to strip away the veil. These aren't just personality traits, these are weapons. 20 reasons why the shadows keep their distance. Some will make you proud, others will make you realize why you've been tested so hard in life. But one reason, the final reason, will make you understand why your path has always felt different. So stay with me until the end, because when you hear number 1, you'll never see yourself or your power the same way again. Reason 1. Unstoppable intensity. The fire that shadows cannot extinguish. I've met Scorpios in every walk of life. CEOs closing billion-dollar deals, soldiers coming home from war, artists painting until sunrise, mothers working 3 jobs while raising children on their own. And no matter where I've found them, one thing has never changed their intensity. This is not the kind of passion that burns hot for a week and then fades. This is a sustained, unrelenting fire, the kind that even the coldest darkness can't smother. When a Scorpio commits, whether to love, to justice, or to a dream, it's as if they weld their soul to that purpose. Every thought, every heartbeat, every ounce of energy aligns toward that one goal. I remember interviewing a retired firefighter in Chicago, a Scorpio man in his late 60s. He told me about the winter night when his team was ordered to retreat from a collapsing building. Everyone else was backing out, he said, but I could hear a baby crying. I knew I had 10 seconds before the floor gave in. 10 seconds was enough. He went in. He came out with the baby. When I asked him if he was afraid, he laughed quietly. Afraid? Sure, but fear doesn't matter when you're already committed. That's the thing about Scorpio intensity. It doesn't erase fear, it makes fear irrelevant. Dark forces, whether in the form of manipulative people or unseen energies, rely on hesitation. They thrive when you doubt yourself, when you pause long enough for them to slip in. But with Scorpio, there is no pause. There is only forward. This intensity radiates like heat off metal. People feel it when you walk into a room, that invisible pressure that says, I will not be stopped. Even those who would oppose you know they're facing someone who won't run, won't fold, and won't quit. And so they hesitate. Scorpio intensity is not about volume or drama. It's not about shouting the loudest or moving the fastest. It's about a depth of focus so pure that the outside world disappears. You don't need to convince anyone of your power, it's felt. It's that feeling when a storm is far on the horizon and yet you already know it's coming. Life lesson from Reason 1: intensity is a double-edged sword. Without direction, it can burn you out or burn bridges you need. But when you aim it with purpose, when you choose a goal worthy of your fire, your intensity becomes unstoppable. For Scorpios, this means one thing: protect your focus like it's sacred. Don't waste it on petty battles, because when your fire is pointed at the right target, there isn't a force on earth or in the shadows that can stand in your way. Reason 2: iron willpower, the mountain that will not move. Scorpio's willpower is not something they switch on when it's convenient. It's forged over years, sometimes decades, of walking through storms that would break most people. I once met a Scorpio woman in her late 40s named Marianne. She had been an ER nurse in New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina. When the floodwaters came, the hospital generators failed, the streets became rivers, and the air smelled of fear. Patients were trapped, the phones were dead, and even the doctors were starting to lose hope. I remember looking at this young man who had just been pulled from the water, she told me. His lungs were full, his skin was blue. People around me were saying it was too late. But Marianne didn't hear too late. She heard, not on my watch. She worked on him for nearly 20 minutes straight, refusing to stop compressions even when her own arms went numb. Finally, he coughed and breathed. That's what Scorpio willpower looks like. It's not about ignoring reality. It's about defying it when reality tries to take something you refuse to give up. Dark forces, whether human or spiritual, know this. They know Scorpio is the mountain they cannot move. Manipulation doesn't work, intimidation fails, even exhaustion can't crack that inner steel. Because Scorpio doesn't fight only for themselves. When they commit to something or someone, they lock in with the kind of focus that turns minutes into hours, hours into days, and days into as long as it takes. In American culture, we romanticize willpower in sports, in war stories, in business. But with Scorpios, it's more than grit, it's identity. You don't become strong in the moment, you already are. The challenge just reveals it. That's why dark forces often choose easier prey. Why fight someone who will fight you back every single day? For years, if necessary, Scorpio's willpower is a contract written in blood. If I decide, I will endure. This is why you'll see Scorpios rebuild after betrayal, outlast opponents in the courtroom, or hold the moral line in a business deal when everyone else folds. It's not stubbornness for its own sake. It's a refusal to betray their own inner compass. Life lesson from reason 2, willpower without clarity is just resistance. But when you know exactly what you're standing for, your will becomes unbreakable. For Scorpios and for anyone listening, the key is this: decide once and then stop deciding. The moment you choose your path, don't reopen the question. Commit so fully that no threat, no temptation, and no setback can make you turn your head. Because the truth is, the world and the shadows always respect the mountain that will not move. Reason 3, master of mystery. Seeing what others cannot see. There's something about a Scorpio that makes people lean in, and yet never quite get all the way in. It's not just secrecy for secrecy's sake, it's the art of selective revelation. Scorpio doesn't hide because they're afraid they hide, because they know that power lives in what you choose not to show. Years ago, I spoke with a private investigator from New York, a Scorpio man named Elijah. He had solved dozens of high-profile cases, including corporate espionage and missing persons. When I asked him how he managed to find things no one else could, he smiled and said, "People talk too much. They show too much. My job is to watch the things they don't say, the things they try to cover." He told me about a case where a CEO's right-hand man was suspected of leaking financial secrets. Everyone on the team had been interrogated, everyone denied involvement. But Elijah noticed something small when the man was asked about a specific date. His eyes flickered for less than half a second toward a security camera in the corner of the room. That was all Elijah needed. The man was caught. The company was saved. This is the essence of Scorpio mystery. They see the tiny invisible tells others miss. Dark forces, human or otherwise, thrive on deception. They weave illusions, hide motives, and twist the truth until no one knows what's real. But a Scorpio, they walk straight through the fog. You can dress the lie in silk, you can bury it under layers of charm or intimidation. It doesn't matter. Scorpio will see the loose thread and pull until the whole thing unravels. American culture often romanticizes detectives, spies, and truth seekers in films and novels, but Scorpios live that reality every day. They are natural code breakers of human behavior. Their mystery is not just about keeping their own secrets safe, it's about uncovering the secrets that others would kill to protect. And here's what truly unsettles the shadows. Scorpio doesn't always announce what they know. They might sit across from you at dinner, smiling all the while holding a truth that could destroy your plans. That silent power is more terrifying than any open confrontation. The result, dark forces approach with caution, because when you can't tell what someone knows or what they're capable of, you don't risk provoking them. Life lesson from reason 3, your mystery is your armor. In a world that rewards oversharing and constant exposure, holding part of yourself back is an act of self-protection and self-respect. You don't have to explain everything you see, and you don't have to reveal everything you know. Sometimes the greatest strength lies in letting people underestimate you, right up until the moment they can't. Reason 4, legendary resilience rising from ashes, the shadows left behind. If there's one image that truly belongs to Scorpio, it's the phoenix, that mythical bird that burns completely, only to rise again stronger than before. For most people, destruction is the end of the story. For Scorpio, it's just the first act. I remember interviewing a Scorpio man named Carlos, a small business owner in Miami. In 2008, the financial crisis hit him like a tidal wave. He lost his shop, his home, and almost all his savings within 6 months. Friends told him to declare bankruptcy, to walk away, to be realistic. But Carlos, he didn't accept the ending others wrote for him. He worked nights as a security guard, saved every dollar, and learned a completely new trade, web development, from free online courses. 5 years later, he launched his own digital agency. By 2020, he was employing 20 people, including some of the same friends who had once told him to give up. That's what resilience looks like when a Scorpio wears it. It's not blind optimism. It's the quiet conviction that no matter how deep the fall, there's always a way up. Dark forces despise this trait. Their whole strategy depends on permanent damage to your confidence, your reputation, your spirit. But with Scorpios, damage never stays permanent. You can wound them, slow them down, even burn their world to the ground, but all you've done is clear the space for their next version, which will be sharper, wiser, and more powerful than the last. In American culture, we celebrate comeback stories: the underdog who refuses to stay down, the athlete who returns after injury, the singer who makes a hit after years of silence. But for Scorpios, comebacks aren't rare, they're inevitable. And here's the real secret: every time a Scorpio rises, they carry with them the lessons from the fall. They don't just return to who they were, they evolve into someone untouchable by the same darkness that once hurt them. That's why even in their lowest moments, Scorpios have an edge. Because somewhere deep inside, they already know, this is not my final chapter. Life lesson from reason 4, your resilience is not about avoiding failure, it's about mastering recovery. Every setback is an invitation to reimagine yourself. For Scorpios and anyone listening, remember the power isn't in never falling. It's in rising so completely that those who doubted you can't recognize the person you've become. And when you rise like that, the shadows don't just step back, they bow. Reason 5, supernatural intuition, the invisible radar that sees through shadows. Some people call it gut feeling, others call it instinct. But for a Scorpio, intuition is not just a whisper, it's a broadcast from a deeper world. It's the radar that scans beyond sight, beyond sound, beyond the surface, and detects what others can't even imagine is there. I once spoke with a Scorpio woman named Tessa, a paramedic in Los Angeles. She told me about the night she and her partner were sent to what was supposed to be a routine call, possible fainting at a small apartment complex. As they pulled up, everything looked normal. Her partner relaxed, chatting about weekend plans. But Tessa froze. "There's something wrong," she said quietly. She couldn't explain it. The lights were on, the front door was open, the building was quiet. And yet, in her chest, she felt a sudden heaviness, like the air itself was warning her. She told her partner to wait and called the police before going in. Minutes later, officers arrived and discovered that the fainting victim was actually bait. The apartment was a setup for an armed robbery. Her intuition saved both of their lives. This is the kind of supernatural perception Scorpios carry. It's not about paranoia, it's about an awareness that reaches into the undercurrents of energy reading signals that most people dismiss. In American culture, we might call it a sixth sense. In spiritual traditions, it's closer to claircognizance, the knowing without knowing how you know. Dark forces loathe this trait because it robs them of their greatest advantage: surprise. They rely on catching people off guard, on hiding their moves until it's too late. But with a Scorpio, the moment they start weaving the trap, something in you feels it. It might come as a chill down your spine, a sudden shift in someone's tone, or a dream that won't leave you in the morning. And here's the most unnerving part for the shadows. Your intuition doesn't just detect danger, it detects motive. Even when the action seems harmless, you sense the why behind it, and that's what really scares them. Life lesson from Reason 5. Your intuition is a gift, but only if you trust it. Most people feel those quiet warnings and talk themselves out of them. Scorpios and anyone listening should remember, if your gut whispers, don't wait for it to scream. The world teaches us to prioritize logic, but survival and sometimes victory belongs to those who honor the messages that arrive without explanation. Because in the end, the shadows can hide from the eyes, but never from the radar of a Scorpio. Reason so. Emotional control, turning the storm into power. If passion is the fire of a Scorpio, then emotional control is the hand that holds the torch steady. Scorpios don't feel less than others. In fact, they often feel more. More joy, more pain, more love, more betrayal. But here's the difference: they know how to take the chaos inside and turn it into focus. I once met a Scorpio named Daniel, a former Marine sniper from Texas. He told me about a mission overseas where his team was ambushed. The situation turned in seconds, bullets cutting the air, radio static screaming in his ear. Most soldiers would have panicked and no one would have blamed them. But Daniel slowed his breathing. He told me, if I let fear in, I'm done. If I let rage in, I'm sloppy. I can feel it all, but I choose when it moves me. In that moment, his control didn't erase the emotions, it channeled them. The fear became alertness. The adrenaline became precision. The anger became resolve. And that control saved lives. In civilian life, Scorpios use the same skill in boardrooms, courtrooms, or even in the middle of a personal crisis. Dark forces hate this because manipulation often works by pulling emotional strings: guilt, anger, sadness. But when a Scorpio refuses to react on cue, when they can feel the wave and still choose their timing, the game is over before it starts. In American culture, we tend to admire cool under pressure. The lawyer who wins the case in the final minute, the athlete who sinks the last shot with the crowd roaring. For Scorpios, that coolness isn't just a performance, it's survival. They've learned that if you let someone else control your emotions, you've handed them the keys to your life. Here's the thing: emotional control isn't coldness, it's mastery. It's the ability to keep your inner weather calm even when the outside world is a hurricane. And that calm is terrifying to those who want to see you break. Life lesson from Reason 6. You can't stop yourself from feeling, and you shouldn't try, but you can decide what those feelings become. For Scorpios and anyone listening, the goal is not to be numb, but to be the one holding the wheel when the storm hits. Because the moment you can take the energy of your emotions and aim it with purpose, you stop being prey and you start being power. Reason 7. Unbreakable loyalty. The shield. No darkness can pierce. When a Scorpio chooses you, they don't just stand beside you, they become your shield. Loyalty for them is not a casual promise, it's a binding vow. And once that vow is made, breaking it is not an option. I remember a story from a Scorpio woman named Renee, a public defender in Boston. She had a client, a young man barely 20, who was accused of a crime that could send him to prison for decades. The evidence against him looked overwhelming. Friends told her to walk away to let the system handle it, but something in her gut told her he was innocent. She worked 16-hour days for months, digging through phone records, interviewing reluctant witnesses, combing through thousands of pages of documents. Everyone around her started to give up hope, even the young man himself. But Renee didn't stop. On the morning of the trial, she presented a piece of evidence. No one had found a security video from a corner store that proved her client wasn't even in the state when the crime happened. The charges were dropped. His life was saved. When I asked her why she fought so hard, she said, "If someone's in my circle, I don't let go. Not when it matters, not ever." That's Scorpio loyalty. It doesn't fade when things get hard. Dark forces hate this trait because loyalty builds alliances, and alliances make you harder to isolate and control. They want to divide, to break bonds, to turn allies against each other. But with a Scorpio, that tactic fails. Once you're under their protection, it would take something catastrophic for them to abandon you, and even then it's more likely they'll go down swinging at your side. In American culture, we often talk about loyalty in the context of friendship, family, or military service. But for Scorpios, it's deeper, it's tribal. If you're one of theirs, they'll defend you with the same ferocity they defend themselves. And here's the part that truly unnerves the shadows, that loyalty is strategic. Scorpio doesn't give it easily, but when they do, it's because they've judged you worthy. It means you've passed the most unspoken test of all, the test of trust. Life lesson from reason 7, loyalty is powerful because it multiplies strength. When you commit to protecting someone, you're not just giving them safety, you're giving them courage. For Scorpios and anyone listening, be intentional about where you place your loyalty. Because when it's given to the right people, it becomes a fortress no darkness can breach. Reason 8. Strategic mind playing the long game. The shadows can't win. If power is muscle, strategy is the brain that tells it where to strike. And Scorpios don't just fight, they plan. They think in layers, in timelines, in outcomes that stretch far beyond the moment. I once spoke with a Scorpio man named Victor, a chess master from New Jersey. He told me about a high-stakes tournament where his opponent opened with an aggressive move that had beaten countless players before. Most people reacted defensively, scrambling to protect their pieces. Victor didn't. Instead, he calmly made a seemingly harmless move, one that looked like a mistake to anyone watching. For the next 20 minutes, his opponent pressed harder, convinced he had the upper hand. Then suddenly, Victor unleashed a series of moves that cornered his opponent's king in 5 turns. When I asked him how he saw it coming, he said, "I wasn't playing against his pieces, I was playing against his mind. Once I knew his rhythm, the game was mine." That's the Scorpio way. Dark forces, whether they're toxic people, corporate predators, or spiritual adversaries, often win by overwhelming their target quickly. But Scorpios don't rush. They observe, they learn the patterns, they let the enemy show their hand, and when the moment comes, they strike so precisely that the opponent doesn't just lose, they don't even understand how they lost. In American culture, we love stories of outsmarting the villain, the courtroom drama where the lawyer drops the unexpected evidence, the sports team that wins in the last second because of a hidden play. Scorpios live that in real life. Their strategic mind makes them unpredictable, and unpredictability's chirtribali is death to those who rely on control. Here's what's even more intimidating. A Scorpio's plan often has backup plans. If plan A fails, plan B is already in motion, and plan C is waiting in the shadows. It's not paranoia, it's preparation. And preparation makes them nearly impossible to trap. Life lesson from Reason 8, strategy isn't about knowing everything. It's about knowing enough to act with precision. For Scorpios and anyone listening, the key is patience. Don't show your moves too soon, and don't waste your energy on unnecessary battles. Because in life, as in chess, the one who controls the pace controls the game. Reason 9, passion for truth. The light that burns through lies. Some people avoid the truth because it's uncomfortable. Some dress it up to make it easier to swallow. But Scorpios, they want the truth raw, unfiltered, and unshakable, even if it cuts. I met a Scorpio journalist named Alyssa, who worked for an investigative news outlet in Washington, D.C. She had been chasing a story about corruption in a major corporation. Everyone warned her to stop digging. The company had powerful lawyers, friends in government, and a history of making problems disappear. But Alyssa wasn't afraid. For 8 months, she followed paper trails, interviewed whistleblowers in secret, and cross-referenced financial records that most people wouldn't have the patience to read. One night, she received a call from an anonymous source with the final piece of evidence, proof of millions in embezzled funds. She published the story. The fallout was immediate resignations, federal investigations, public outrage. When I asked her why she risked so much, she said, "Because lies rot everything they touch, and the longer they're hidden, the deeper they go." That's what scares the shadows about Scorpios. They don't just see through lies, they expose them. Dark forces depend on deception like oxygen. They twist facts, hide motives, and cover tracks. But a Scorpio's passion for truth is relentless. They'll follow the trail no matter how dangerous, and once they find it, they drag it into the light where darkness dies. In American culture, we celebrate whistleblowers, reformers, and truth-tellers because they remind us of something essential. Truth is the foundation of freedom. For Scorpios, seeking truth isn't just a principle, it's instinct. They can't stand the taste of dishonesty, and when they commit to uncovering it, they won't stop until the whole picture is clear. What's even more unnerving for dark forces is that Scorpios aren't easily fooled by partial truths. They can sense when something is missing, when the story doesn't match the energy, and they have the patience to keep asking, keep listening, and keep pressing until the mask comes off. Life lesson from Reason 9: truth is power, but it often comes at a cost. For Scorpios and anyone listening, the lesson is this: if you choose to live by truth, be prepared to face resistance. But also remember, every lie you expose clears the air, strengthens trust, and frees you from manipulation. And when you shine that light, the shadows have no choice but to retreat. Reason 10: natural magnetism, the pull no shadow can resist. Some people enter a room and go unnoticed. A Scorpio enters, and without a word, the atmosphere changes. It's not always about looks or status, it's an energy, a gravitational pull that commands attention. I once spoke with a Scorpio man named Julian, a trial lawyer from Chicago. He told me about a case where his client was hopelessly outmatched. The opposing side had more evidence, more witnesses, and more resources. But on the first day in court, Julian didn't say a word for the first half hour. He just watched. By the time he finally spoke, the entire jury was leaning forward as if waiting for a secret to be revealed. That's the power of natural magnetism. It's not forced. It's a quiet confidence, a deep authenticity that draws people in without them realizing why. And it's the same force that makes dark energies nervous, because magnetism is influence, and influence can't be bought or faked. Shadows rely on control through fear or manipulation, but Scorpio magnetism bypasses those tools entirely. Instead of pushing, they pull. People want to hear them, follow them, believe them, even when they haven't decided why. In American culture, we see magnetism in leaders, artists, and activist figures who can stand on a stage and silence a crowd before they even speak. For Scorpios, this isn't performance, it's presence. It comes from knowing who they are and refusing to shrink for anyone. And here's the unsettling part: for the darkness, magnetism attracts everything, allies, opportunities, resources, but it also attracts the truth. The more people draw close to a Scorpio, the more likely secrets will spill, loyalties will be tested, and hidden motives will surface. magnetism becomes not just a tool for connection, but a spotlight that exposes what lives in the shadows. Life lesson from Reason 10. Magnetism is not about being liked, it's about being undeniable. For Scorpios and anyone listening, the lesson is to own your presence. Don't dilute yourself to make others comfortable. When you stand fully in who you are, the right people will be drawn to you, and the wrong ones will reveal themselves. Either way, you win. Reason 11. Cold blood. The calm that freezes the shadows. Most people think of courage as loud shouting in the face of danger, charging forward in a blaze of glory. But Scorpio courage is different. It's quiet, still, ice in the veins when the world expects you to burn. I once met a Scorpio woman named Naomi, a hostage negotiator in Los Angeles. She told me about a case where a man was holding 2 people at gunpoint inside a convenience store. The SWAT team was tense, the crowd outside was panicking, and every second felt like it could be the last. Naomi walked in unarmed. She kept her voice steady, her eyes level, her movements slow. Inside, she told me her heart was racing, but she didn't let it show. I had to be the coldest person in that room, she said, because the minute I showed fear, he'd feel in control. For 40 minutes, she spoke with him. No sudden gestures, no raised voice, just a steady, controlled presence that slowly drained the adrenaline from the room. By the end, he handed her the gun. No shots fired, no one hurt. That's the Scorpio advantage, the ability to shut down panic before it can take root. Dark forces thrive on chaos. They want you reactive, emotional, off balance. But when a Scorpio goes cold, that chaos hits a wall. It's like trying to set fire to stone. In American culture, we admire the athlete who sinks the game-winning shot under pressure, the surgeon who operates flawlessly in a crisis. For Scorpios, this isn't just skill, it's instinct. They've trained themselves to keep emotion in check until the moment it's most useful. And here's what really unnerves the shadows. Cold. Blood doesn't mean cold heart. The emotion is still there, it's just locked away until the right time. And when Scorpio finally chooses to act, it's decisive, surgical, and impossible to counter. Life lesson from Reason 11, emotional heat can be powerful, but in the wrong moment, it can be your undoing. For Scorpios and anyone listening, the lesson is to master the art of the pause. When the world expects you to explode, stay still. When others are shouting, lower your voice, because sometimes the calmest person in the room is the one who wins. Reason 12. Connection to the occult. Walking between worlds. Some Scorpios don't just live in the physical world. They carry one foot in the unseen, a place where energy moves before events happen, where whispers in the dark reveal more than the loudest voices. I once met a Scorpio man named Elias in New Orleans, a city where the air itself seems to hum with spiritual history. By day, he worked as an antiques dealer. By night, he studied old manuscripts, divination techniques, and the hidden language of symbols. One evening, a woman came into his shop looking for a specific mirror, a family heirloom she claimed had been stolen decades ago. Elias didn't just check his inventory. He asked her questions about her dreams. She hesitated, then told him she'd been having visions of a room she'd never seen, always with that same mirror in the corner. Elias closed his eyes for a moment and described the rest of the room to her: the cracked wallpaper, the scent of cedar, the faint hum of a ceiling fan. She gasped. It was her grandmother's bedroom, exactly as she remembered from childhood. A week later, Elias found the mirror in the back of a private collector's warehouse. He never explained how he knew. That's the Scorpio connection to the occult, not cheap theatrics, but a deep, instinctive relationship with the hidden. Dark forces are unsettled by this because they can't predict, it can't block it, and can't hide from it. While others see only surface reality, Scorpio can sense the current beneath, whether through dreams, symbols, or sudden flashes of knowing. In American culture, the occult is often sensationalized fortune tellers with crystal balls, horror movie tropes, stage magicians. But for Scorpios, the connection is subtler, quieter, and far more real. It's not about showmanship, it's about access to information and energy that most people never notice. And here's what makes it dangerous for the shadows. Scorpio doesn't just sense darkness, they know how to use that knowledge. They can read the intention behind the action, the truth behind the mask, and the weakness behind the threat. Life lesson from Reason 12. The unseen world is always influencing the one we can see. For Scorpios and anyone listening, the lesson is to respect your intuitive and spiritual senses, even if they don't make logical sense at first. Pay attention to symbols, to dreams, to those sudden chills that tell you something's not right. Because when you walk with awareness between worlds, the darkness can't sneak up on you, and sometimes it's the one that backs away first. Reason 13. Capacity for transformation, becoming stronger. Every time you break Scorpios, don't fear endings. They've learned sometimes the hard way that endings are only doorways disguised as walls. When life burns them down to ashes, they don't just rebuild, they reinvent. I once met a Scorpio woman named Lila from Detroit. She had been a successful architect until a personal tragedy. The sudden loss of her partner left her hollow and unable to work. For months, she barely left her apartment. Friends feared she'd never recover. But then something shifted. Lila began sketching again, not buildings this time, but abstract shapes inspired by her grief. She submitted one of her pieces to a local art show. It sold within an hour. A year later, she was no longer designing skyscrapers. She was a full-time artist. Her work featured in galleries from New York to San Francisco. When I asked how she made the leap, she told me, "I didn't get my old life back. I built a new one, and I like this one better." That's the essence of Scorpio transformation. Dark forces want you stuck, replaying the same pain, living in the same wound, clinging to what you've lost. But Scorpios have a rare ability to shed old versions of themselves without fear. It's not about forgetting the past, it's about using it as raw material for what comes next. In American culture, we celebrate comeback stories, but for Scorpios, transformation is more than a comeback, it's an upgrade. Every fall teaches them something that makes the next rise more powerful. Every betrayal sharpens their instincts. Every heartbreak expands their capacity for depth and empathy. Here's what terrifies the shadows. You can't defeat someone who becomes more dangerous every time you hurt them. Every attempt to break a Scorpio only guarantees they'll return more evolved, more creative, and more impossible to stop. Life lesson from Reason 13. Transformation isn't about going back to who you were. It's about becoming someone you've never been before. For Scorpios and anyone listening, the key is to stop mourning the doors that have closed and start looking for the ones your pain has opened. Because when you embrace transformation, you don't just survive the darkness, you turn it into fuel for the brightest version of yourself. Reason 14, protector of the vulnerable standing between the wolf and the lamb. When a Scorpio decides someone is under their protection, it's not just a promise, it's a declaration of war to anything that dares to harm them. They don't just defend, they shield. And they will take the first blow before they let it touch the people they care about. I once met a Scorpio man named Andre, a high school teacher in Philadelphia. One afternoon, he saw a freshman being cornered by 3 older students in the hallway. He didn't hesitate. He stepped between them, his voice low but unshakable. "If you want him, you go through me." The bullies backed down. Not because Andre was bigger, he wasn't, but because there was no doubt in his eyes. It was the same look I've seen in soldiers, parents, and activists who've drawn their line in the sand and will not move. Later, I learned Andre had been that bullied freshman himself years earlier. He told me I swore if I ever had the power to stop it for someone else, I'd use it. Every time. That's the Scorpio protector's code. Dark forces fear this trait because it means they can't reach their real target. If you're in a Scorpio circle, you're behind a wall that darkness can't breach without a fight. And here's the thing, Scorpios don't care if the odds are against them. The moment they sense injustice, they're already moving forward. In American culture, we admire the hero who rushes into danger to save a stranger, the activist who risks everything to defend the powerless. For Scorpios, this instinct is woven into their DNA. They don't just protect individuals, they protect principles. And it's not just about strength, it's about strategy. A Scorpio will make sure the people they protect are not only safe in the moment, but safer in the future. They'll teach you to fight for yourself, to spot danger early, to stand taller. Life lesson from Reason for Protection isn't only about stepping in, it's about standing up. For Scorpios and anyone listening, the lesson is this: if you have the ability to defend someone, use it. Not for recognition, not for glory, but because there's a part of the world that only gets better when someone refuses to look away. And when you become that shield, the darkness will think twice before crossing your line. Reason 15. Determination to the end. The relentless pursuit shadows can't outlast. If there's one thing that breaks most people, it's time. The longer the fight drags on, the more resolve weakens. But Scorpios, they only get sharper the longer the battle lasts. I once met a Scorpio woman named Monica, a marathon runner from Boston. She wasn't the fastest sprinter, but her strength was endurance both on the track and in life. Years ago, she tore a ligament in her knee just 6 months before the Boston Marathon. Doctors told her she'd be lucky to jog again, let alone compete. Monica didn't argue. She just nodded and began the slow, painful process of rehab. Every morning before sunrise, she was in the gym. Every night she was icing her knee and visualizing the race. On race day, she didn't just run, she finished. Not in first place, but upright, strong, and with tears in her eyes, because she had refused to let the injury write her ending. That's the Scorpio spirit. When they lock onto a goal, it's like steel snapping into place. Dark forces hate this trait because most of their strategies depend on wearing their target down. They create delays, throw obstacles, and hope the will to fight will fade. But with Scorpios, time works the opposite way. Every setback is fuel. Every delay is another layer of resolve. In American culture, we love the underdog story, the fighter who goes 12 rounds when everyone thought they'd fall in 3. Scorpios embody that on every level. It's not about whether it's easy or quick, it's about finishing. And here's what's terrifying for the shadows. Once a Scorpio decides something is worth the fight, they will carry that fight through to the bitter end, no matter how far, how long, or how dark the path becomes. Life lesson from Reason 15. Determination isn't about avoiding failure, it's about refusing to let failure be the final word. For Scorpios and anyone listening, the lesson is simple. Decide what's worth your endurance and then commit so fully that quitting is not even an option you entertain. Because when the darkness realizes you won't stop, it often stops trying. Reason 16. Mastery of silence, winning the battle before it begins. Most people fear silence. They rush to fill it with words, noise, movement, anything to avoid the discomfort of stillness. But a Scorpio, they make silence their weapon. I met a Scorpio man named Raymond, a high-stakes negotiator for a Fortune 500 company in New York. He told me about a tense meeting where the opposing side was trying to pressure his team into signing a deal that heavily favored them. The room was buzzing with arguments and numbers flying across the table. Raymond didn't join the chaos. He just sat back, eyes steady, hands folded. When the other side demanded a response, he let the silence stretch. 10 seconds, 20, 30. By the 45th second, the lead negotiator on the other side began to fidget. Then he started talking, trying to fill the space. And in those unguarded words, he revealed a concession that changed the entire deal in Raymond's favor. That's the mastery of silence. Dark forces hate this because silence strips them of control. It forces them to confront their own thoughts, their own doubts, and their own fear without distraction. When a Scorpio stays silent, it's not because they have nothing to say, it's because they're listening to everything you're not saying. In American culture, we celebrate the powerful speech, the rallying cry, the witty comeback. But the truth is, silence can be louder than any words, and Scorpios know exactly when to use it. Here's what really unsettles the shadows. Silence creates uncertainty, and uncertainty is where mistakes are made. While others rush to act or speak, Scorpio waits. And in the waiting, they see more, understand more, and prepare to strike with precision. Life lesson from Reason 16. Silence is not emptiness, it's space. Space to observe, to think, to gather strength. For Scorpios and anyone listening, the lesson is this: don't be afraid to let silence work for you. Sometimes the smartest move is to say nothing and let the other side reveal themselves. Reason 17. Hidden ambition. The quiet fire that outlasts the darkness. Some people broadcast their dreams to the world, announcing every move before they make it. Scorpios. They let their ambition burn where no one can see until the results speak louder than any promise. I met a Scorpio woman named Claire, a single mother from Seattle who worked as a night janitor at a tech company. Her co-workers saw her mopping floors and assumed that was the limit of her story. What they didn't know was that every night after her shift, she stayed in the empty office and taught herself coding from the company's old manuals and free online resources. For 3 years, she kept that fire to herself. No boasting, no hints, no visible signs. Then one day, when a junior developer quit suddenly, she quietly applied for the position. Within 6 months, she was leading a small team. 2 years later, she was managing an entire department. When I asked her why she kept it secret for so long, she said, "Because the less people know, the less they can interfere. My ambition is mine until I'm ready to show it." That's the Scorpio way. Their goals are not for public entertainment. Dark forces despise this because they can't sabotage what they can't see. They depend on early visibility, on getting inside your plans before they're complete. But when your ambition is hidden, you control the timeline, the pace, and the reveal. In American culture, ambition is often loud motivational speeches, social media announcements, constant self-promotion. But Scorpios understand the value of stealth. Like a seed underground, their plans grow in silence until the moment they break the surface in full bloom. And here's what makes it powerful. Hidden ambition means there's no wasted energy defending your dream from doubters or critics. It's yours, pure and untouched, until you choose to bring it into the light. Life lesson from Reason 17. Not every goal needs an audience. For Scorpios and anyone listening, the lesson is to protect your biggest ambitions until they're strong enough to stand on their own. Because the quieter you work, the harder it is for the darkness or anyone else to block your path. Reason 18. Superhuman courage. Facing the darkness without blinking. Fear is a language that darkness speaks fluently. It counts on your hesitation, your trembling, your instinct to run. But Scorpios, they don't just stand their ground, they walk straight into the fire. I once met a Scorpio man named Darius, a volunteer firefighter in a rural town in Montana. One winter night, he arrived at a burning cabin where neighbors screamed that a child was trapped inside. The roof was collapsing, the smoke so thick you couldn't see the door. The fire chief told everyone to wait for backup. Darius didn't wait. He tied a wet cloth around his face, dropped to his knees, and crawled in. Inside, the heat was suffocating the air, thick with ash, but he kept moving forward, guided only by faint cries and instinct. Minutes later, he emerged with the child in his arms. When I asked what went through his mind, he said nothing. There wasn't time to think. I knew what had to be done, so I did it. That's the Scorpio courage, not recklessness, but the deep-rooted belief that some things matter more than fear. Dark forces hate this because courage is their enemy. Fear is how they control, manipulate, and paralyze, but courage breaks their hold completely. In American culture, we honor soldiers, first responders, and everyday heroes who risk everything for others. Scorpios carry that same spirit into every arena of life, whether it's confronting a bully, exposing corruption, or protecting someone they love. And here's the truth. Superhuman courage doesn't come from not feeling fear. It comes from looking fear in the eye and acting anyway because your values are stronger than your instincts to run. Life lesson from Reason 18. Courage is not the absence of fear, it's the decision that something else matters more. For Scorpios and anyone listening, the lesson is to define what you stand for so clearly that when fear shows up, it has no vote in your decision. Because the moment you act from that place, the darkness has already lost. Reason 19. Intriguing mystery. The veil that shadows can't see through. Some people are an open book. Every thought, every plan, every feeling written in plain sight. A Scorpio. They're a locked library where the shelves go deeper than anyone can count. I once met a Scorpio woman named Sabine, an art curator in San Francisco. She was known for bringing together exhibitions that no one else could have imagined, pieces from different centuries, cultures and themes all woven into a story that somehow felt like they were always meant to belong together. When I asked how she came up with her ideas, she just smiled and said, "I listen more than I speak, and I never show all my cards." Her colleagues admitted they could never predict her next move. And that unpredictability was exactly why she was so successful. Competitors couldn't copy her, and critics couldn't prepare for what she'd reveal next. That's the power of the Scorpio mystery. Dark forces thrive when they can read their opponent, anticipate, manipulate, undermine. But with a Scorpio, every answer leads to more questions. Every glance hints at more than it shows. It's like trying to navigate a labyrinth where the walls shift just when you think you know the way. In American culture, mystery is magnetic. Think of iconic actors, leaders, or artists whose allure comes not from what they say, but from what they don't say. Scorpios live in that space naturally. Their depth isn't an act, it's who they are. They understand that revealing too much gives power away, and that sometimes the most commanding presence in the room is the one who speaks the least and watches the most. And here's what truly rattles the shadows. Mystery isn't just protection, it's strategy. When no one can predict your moves, they can't control the game. Life. Lesson from Reason 19. Your mystery is not a wall, it's a filter. For Scorpios and anyone listening, the lesson is to let people earn access to your inner world. Not everyone deserves to know your story, and not every part of your story needs to be told, because when you keep them guessing, the darkness can't prepare for your next move. Reason 20. Indomitable spirit, the flame that will never die. Every trait we've talked about so far, intensity, willpower, courage, mystery, all of it comes from one source, the Scorpio spirit. And that spirit cannot be bought, bent, or broken. I once met a Scorpio man named Marcus, a civil rights lawyer from Atlanta. Over his career, he faced threats, smear campaigns, even physical attacks because of the cases he took on. One case in particular put him directly in the crosshairs of powerful people who wanted him silenced. They froze his accounts, spread lies in the media, and pressured his closest allies to abandon him. But Marcus didn't fold. He worked pro bono using borrowed office space, eating from food trucks because his accounts were locked. And when the case finally went to trial, he walked into that courtroom with the same steady fire in his eyes that he'd had on day one. He won. When I asked how he kept going when everything seemed lost, he said, "They can take my money, my comfort, even my safety, but they will never take my will to stand." That's the indomitable spirit of a Scorpio, the unshakable core that refuses to yield. Dark forces can break bones, closed doors turn allies into enemies, but they cannot touch the part of you that decides who you are. And for Scorpios, that part burns hotter than any threat they face. In American culture, we celebrate resilience, but indomitable spirit goes beyond resilience. Resilience is recovering from a hit. Indomitable spirit is looking your opponent in the eye after the hit and saying, "Is that all you've got?" Here's why the shadows fear it. Every other weapon they have, fear, deception, isolation, eventually fails when it meets a spirit that won't bow. Because even if they win a battle, they can never win the war against someone who refuses to surrender. Life lesson from Reason 20. Your spirit is the one thing in life that truly belongs to you. For Scorpios and anyone listening, protect it like the most sacred treasure you own. Because as long as your spirit stands unbroken, no darkness can ever claim victory over you. And when you carry that truth, you don't just survive the shadows, you outshine them. Conclusion. Why the shadows step back from Scorpio. So here we are. 20 reasons. 20 ways the world and even the darkest forces in it know better than to take a Scorpio lightly. We've talked about the unstoppable fire that drives you, the iron will that anchors you, the mystery that shields you, the courage that carries you, and the spirit that will never break. We've seen you in battle, in silence, in transformation, and in the unseen places where shadows live. And every single time, you don't just hold your ground, you take it back. If you've ever wondered why your life has tested you so hard, why you've had to endure trials that others can't imagine, this is why. Because your power was never meant to be average. You were built to stand where others fall, to rise where others fade, to see what others miss, and to guard what others can't protect. Darkness doesn't fear the ordinary, it fears the unstoppable, and Scorpio, that's you. But here's the final truth, your power means nothing if you don't own it. Every reason we've shared today is a weapon, but it's your choice whether to carry it. And when you do, when you step fully into the fire of who you are, you become the one thing the shadows can't control, can't predict, and can't defeat. So I'll leave you with this. Protect your fire, guard your spirit. And remember that the tests you've faced were not sent to destroy you, they were sent to prove to the darkness that it can't win. If you're a Scorpio, tell me in the comments which of these 20 traits is your greatest weapon and which one you're still learning to master. And if you're not a Scorpio, but you've felt this message in your bones, let us know, because these lessons belong to anyone ready to rise above the shadows. This is the path to Buddha wisdom. Subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to remember their own strength and never forget you were built for battles that darkness will always lose.